It usually happens around maybe 9 p.m. You're standing there in the kitchen, the refrigerator door is just wide open, casting this harsh fluorescent glow across the room.
Right, we've all been there.
Yeah. And the thing is, you aren't actually physically hungry. I mean, you just finished dinner 2 hours ago, but you're stressed about some deadline or, maybe you had a weird interaction with a coworker, and suddenly a whole sleeve of chocolate chip cookies just feels like the absolute only logical solution to this complex psychological problem. It's such a specific, isolating feeling.
It is. It really is a profoundly universal human experience, though. We continually treat food as a salve. We expect a physical substance,
Mm.
sugar, salt, fat, to somehow bandage a purely emotional wound.
And it never works.
No, it never works.
Yeah.
And when it inevitably doesn't, we just feel worse.
Yeah.
We end up layering guilt right on top of that original stress.
It totally feels like a moral failure. Like like you just didn't have enough willpower to simply close the pantry door and walk away. But what if we're looking at this entirely the wrong way? What if it's not a lack of willpower at all, but just a fundamental misunderstanding of the machinery inside of us?
That's the real question.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Whether you're trying to understand your own late-night kitchen habits or you're just insanely curious about the weird quirks of human behavior, our mission today is to cut through all the noise. Okay, let's unpack this. We are zeroing in on a highly focused, singular framework today, simply titled Natural Ways to Control Emotional Eating.
And it's a fascinating piece of research, mostly because of its extreme brevity. I mean, it does not waste a single word or offer any fluff.
No fluff at all. When we first looked at this material, I was just struck by how concise it is. But it's so densely packed. It lays out a highly specific 7-pillar formula for addressing emotional eating. Just 7 things.
Yeah.
It gives us mindful eating, balanced meals, stress management, hydration, sleep, exercise, and healthy coping strategies. That's it. That is the entire roadmap.
Yeah, and what is crucial to understand right from the jump is that this framework mandates a holistic approach. It is definitely not offering some single magic bullet.
You can't just pick and choose.
Exactly. You cannot just pick one of those 7 pillars, ignore the other 6, and expect to fundamentally change a deeply ingrained behavioral loop. So to really understand the causality here, we need to break these 7 pillars down into logical phases. We're going to look at the immediate reality of the plate, then the physical baseline of the body, and finally the mental landscape.
I love that structure. Let's start right there at the plate, in the present moment. Because before we zoom out to look at your entire lifestyle, we have to talk about that immediate interaction with the food itself. So the framework pairs mindful eating with balanced meals. Now, when I think of mindful eating, it reminds me of trying to watch a really complex, beautifully directed movie.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Because if you're sitting on the couch just scrolling on your phone the whole time, you're going to miss the plot. You're going to miss the subtle acting. You won't even realize what you just watched. You have to actually be present to experience it.
You're just completely checked out.
Exactly. If we are eating while answering emails or driving or watching TV, we just aren't present.
Right.
We totally miss the body's subtle signals. But I'm trying to wrap my head around a kind of chicken or egg scenario here.
Okay.
Does a balanced meal actually stop the emotional urge to eat? Or is the physical balance just a prerequisite for the mindfulness to even happen in the first place?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the research deliberately pairs the psychological act, the mindful eating, with the physical reality of the balanced meal. It treats them as 2 sides of the exact same coin when you're tackling emotional eating directly at the dining table.
So they can't really be separated.
No, they really can't. To get to the core of your question, the physical balance is absolutely the prerequisite. Think about the underlying mechanism of a balanced meal. When we say balanced, we are talking about the right ratio of complex carbohydrates, proteins, and healthy fats.
Right.
The reason that matters for your emotions is blood sugar. If you eat a meal that is entirely refined carbohydrates, let's say a giant plate of white pasta or just a bagel on the run, your blood sugar spikes dramatically and then it crashes hard.
And that crash physically feels indistinguishable from panic. Like your heart rate might go up, you feel a little shaky, a little anxious.
Yes, exactly. A blood sugar crash triggers the rapid release of adrenaline and cortisol. Your body literally enters a physiological state of emergency that beautifully mimics an emotional crisis.
Wow.
So if you're a person who is already prone to emotional eating and you sit down to an unbalanced meal, you are setting a biological trap for yourself. You cannot successfully practice mindful eating if your biology is screaming that it is in a life or death state of emergency due to crashing glucose levels.
That makes so much sense. So the balanced meal just stabilizes that physical environment.
Precisely. The protein and fat slow down the digestion of the carbohydrates, giving you a steady, slow burn of energy. That physical stability is the runway that allows the psychological tool, the mindfulness, to actually take off.
You're basically quieting the physical alarm so you can actually hear your own thoughts.
Yes.
You're removing the biological panic so that you only have to deal with the actual emotional issue at hand. I mean, mindfulness isn't just about chewing your food 30 times and breathing deeply. It's about having the biological bandwidth to notice when you're actually full or, when you're just eating because you're profoundly bored.
Right, because when you're truly present and your blood sugar is perfectly stable, you finally have the space to ask yourself, am I eating this because my body needs fuel? Or am I eating this because I am trying to numb a feeling? You only get the luxury of that space if the physical meal is balanced.
Okay, so if a balanced plate gives you the biological bandwidth to be mindful, that bandwidth doesn't just reset every time you push your chair away from the table.
No, not at all.
Your body carries its physical state around 24/7, which makes me look at the next three pillars, hydration, sleep, and exercise, in a completely different light. Because you can't fix the plate if the physical machine itself is completely breaking down behind the scenes.
It is entirely interconnected. The state of the machine dictates the behavior.
Now, I am going to push back a little bit on these three.
Mhm.
I look at hydration, sleep, and exercise, and to me, those are like the standard check engine lights on a car dashboard.
Sure.
It's incredibly easy for any health article to just broadly prescribe drink more water, get some sleep, go for a walk for literally any problem under the sun. Got a headache, drink water, bad mood, take a nap, sore back, do some yoga.
It becomes white noise.
Exactly. Are these just generic, run-of-the-mill wellness tips being recycled here, or are these presented as direct interventions for emotional eating?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the significance of these three elements being explicitly listed as remedies for an emotional issue is quite profound. The research views the physical state of the body, how rested, how hydrated, and how physically active it is, as fundamentally inseparable from the emotional urges that drive us to the pantry.
So they aren't just generic tips.
Not at all. They are targeted strikes against specific biological triggers. Let's look at the underlying logic, starting with sleep. Sleep deprivation is not just about feeling groggy during a morning meeting. When you are underslept, your body fundamentally alters its hormone production.
Okay, how so?
Well, it decreases leptin, which is the hormone that signals satiety and tells your brain you are full, and it aggressively increases ghrelin, which is the hormone that stimulates appetite.
Wait, so when you only get like 5 hours of sleep, your body is literally pumping out a chemical cocktail that forces you to feel hungrier the next day, regardless of what you actually eat.
Yes, your body is desperately seeking energy because it didn't get it through the restorative process of sleep. So it drives you toward a high-calorie, sugary foods for a quick, accessible fix. But taking that a step further, lack of sleep drastically impairs the prefrontal cortex.
And that's the logic center, right?
Exactly. That is the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, logic, and impulse control. At the same time, sleep deprivation heightens activity in the amygdala, which is the emotional reactive center of the brain.
Oh boy.
So the CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is basically asleep at the desk, while the impulsive emotional toddler, the amygdala, is running the company. You have higher hunger hormones, lower fullness hormones, and a completely compromised ability to say no. That is a direct biological trigger for emotional eating.
Sleep is literally armor against impulsive decisions. The less you have, the thinner the armor.
That's a great way to put it.
What about hydration then? Because mistaking thirst for hunger is something you hear about in passing, but is the mechanism really that powerful of a driver for an emotional binge?
The mechanism is much deeper than just having a dry mouth. The hypothalamus, which is a tiny region at the base of your brain, regulates both hunger and thirst. Those signals can and do easily get crossed. But the real issue is how hydration affects your energy at a cellular level.
Okay.
Think about how your body stores energy. It stores it in your muscles and liver as glycogen. But to metabolize that glycogen and actually use it for energy, your body requires water. It is a strict chemical requirement.
So it's like a locked reserve tank.
Yes.
Ah.
And when you are even mildly dehydrated, that metabolic process slows down. Your energy dips. Your brain recognizes the drop in available energy, But because it can't efficiently access the stored glycogen without water, it demands the fastest, easiest energy source available to bridge the gap, which
Oh.
is simple sugars.
It completely bypasses the locked reserves and just begs for a candy bar.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
You aren't actually hungry. Your body is just trying to have a backdoor method to get energy because it lacks the water to use what it already has. Furthermore, mild dehydration causes fatigue, difficulty concentrating, and significant mood swings. When you suddenly feel irritable and lethargic in the mid-afternoon, your brain often misinterprets that biological dip as an emotional dip that needs to be fixed with a snack. Staying hydrated removes that false emotional trigger entirely.
That is wild. It's like your body is speaking a completely different language. It's asking for a glass of water to run a metabolic process, but your brain translates it as, I am sad and I need a donut.
Yes, the translation gets entirely scrambled.
And then we have exercise, which I assume is a similar story. When this framework prescribes exercise for emotional eating, I'm guessing it isn't talking about burning calories to offset the cookies.
Oh, burning calories is almost entirely beside the point in this context.
Yeah.
It is talking about mechanical emotional regulation.
Mechanical.
Yes. Physical movement is one of the most highly effective ways to process and clear cortisol, the primary stress hormone, from your bloodstream. Evolutionarily, when we experienced stress, it meant we had to physically run or fight. The stress response prepared the body for movement. Today, we experience intense stress sitting at a desk, reading an email, and then we just stay sitting.
The cortisol just sits there, revving the engine while the car is in park.
It keeps your body in a prolonged state of low-grade fight or flight. And what do we do when we are trapped in fight or flight with no physical release? We seek comfort. We seek a quick hit of dopamine to counteract the cortisol. We seek highly palatable food.
Of course we do.
Exercise processes that stress mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
A brisk walk, a run, or a gym session literally utilizes that cortisol and adrenaline, clearing it from the system so you don't have to try and process it orally with a pint of ice cream later that night.
Okay, that completely reframes the entire concept of the physical baseline for me. They aren't generic wellness tips. They are preemptive strikes against the specific biological conditions that masquerade as emotional eating.
Exactly.
If your check engine light is on because you're exhausted, dehydrated, and buzzing with unprocessed cortisol from a frustrating Zoom call, of course you're going to eat your feelings. Your body is desperately trying to regulate itself in the absolute only way it knows how in that moment.
And that's a fight your willpower will lose every single time because biology doesn't get tired. Willpower does.
Yeah.
You're asking your conscious mind to override millions of years of evolutionary survival mechanisms.
Yeah, good luck with that. But here's where it gets really interesting, though, because physical maintenance is obviously crucial. We've clearly established that you need sleep, water, and movement to keep the machine running. But at the end of the day, the core issue we are discussing is emotional eating. So we have to transition from the body back to the mind. We have to culminate in how we actually handle the psychological triggers when they inevitably arrive.
Because they will arrive.
They always do. So the research lists two specific things here: stress management and healthy coping strategies. Now, I look at those two terms, and it's very easy to lump them together into the same bucket.
It is, yeah.
But I want to use an analogy here. I like to think about dealing with our emotions like managing the water levels of a coastal city. Stress management seems like installing a massive levee system around the town. It involves years of planning, daily maintenance, and structural boundaries, all designed to keep the normal daily tides from flooding the streets. But healthy coping strategies, those seem like the sandbags you desperately throw down when a Category 5 hurricane unexpectedly hits. Are we interpreting these as two distinct phases of defense?
This raises an important question, and your analogy perfectly captures why the distinction is so vital. It is incredibly common to dismiss those terms as generic psychobabble, but they are separated in this framework for a very specific reason.
So they are distinct.
Very much so. Stress management is the levee. It is entirely proactive and preventative. It is about how you architect your lifestyle to keep the overall baseline of stress from boiling over. It includes the hard boundaries you set at work so you aren't checking emails at midnight.
Right, the stuff you do every day.
Exactly. It is the way you manage your schedule to avoid chronic rushing. It's the daily, non-negotiable practices you engage in, like meditation, journaling, or simply taking a lunch break away from your desk to keep your baseline arousal low.
So stress management is about actively lowering the temperature of your day-to-day existence so the water never even reaches the top of the wall.
It's creating a buffer. But healthy coping strategies, that is entirely reactive. That is the in-the-moment sandbag you need when the hurricane makes landfall.
When things go wrong.
Because no matter how meticulously you manage your stress, how high you build the levee, life happens. You get a terrible phone call about a family member, you get a flat tire on the highway, the pouring rain, your boss yells at you unfairly.
The unpredictable stuff.
Right. Your emotions are going to spike dramatically, and your physiological arousal is going to go through the roof. A healthy coping strategy is what you intentionally do in that exact second of acute distress, instead of reaching for the pantry door.
It's the immediate substitute for the food.
It has to be an action that provides genuine relief or distraction without the negative feedback loop of a binge. It might be calling a trusted friend to vent for 5 minutes.
Right.
It might be doing a box breathing exercise, inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, to force the parasympathetic nervous system to engage. It might be physically stepping outside to feel the cold air on your face and shock your system out of a thought spiral. The logic here is that you absolutely, unequivocally need both the levee and the sandbags.
Because if you only have the sandbags, the coping strategies, but you do zero proactive stress management, you're going to be constantly battling floods. You'll be playing whack-a-mole with your emotions all day, every day.
You will suffer from absolute decision fatigue. If every single day is a hurricane, eventually you will run out of sandbags, you will get exhausted, and you will eat. You cannot white-knuckle your way through a chronically stressful life using breathing exercises alone.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting. But on the flip side, if you only have stress management, the perfect levee and no in-the-moment coping strategies, the second something unexpected happens and shatters your peaceful baseline, the water comes rushing in.
Exactly.
You won't have a mechanism to deal with the acute pain, and you'll default right back to the most familiar comfort. You will default to the food.
You have to systematically lower the baseline, and you have to have a battle plan ready for the inevitable spikes.
Yeah.
They work in tandem to protect the system.
So what does this all mean? If we take a step back and look at the whole picture, this incredibly concise piece of research gave us the Magnificent Seven: mindful eating, balanced meals, stress management, hydration, sleep, exercise, and healthy coping strategies.
Yes.
It is such a tight, dense list of instructions, but it's clearly not just a list of chores to check off a whiteboard.
No, and for you listening right now, this is the most critical takeaway to overcome the information overload that usually surrounds diet and psychology. These 7 items are not random tips you pull from a hat. They are an intricate, interconnected web.
They all lean on each other.
Right. If one single pillar falls, the entire mechanism of emotional eating can kick in. If you sleep poorly, your hormones demand sugar. If you don't manage your baseline stress, your willpower is eroded by noon. If your plate isn't balanced with protein and fat, your blood sugar crashes and creates biological panic, rendering mindfulness impossible.
It really is a system.
This entire framework is showing us that emotional eating is rarely just about the emotion. It is almost always about a structural failure somewhere in this interconnected system that leaves you vulnerable to the emotion.
It is a profound shift in perspective. Honestly, it takes so much of the shame out of the experience. It moves the conversation away from a perceived character flaw and turns it into a simple systems check. You aren't weak, you're just tired, or you're severely dehydrated, or you're dealing with a massive blood sugar crash while lacking an in-the-moment coping mechanism.
And that's incredibly empowering.
It really is. Which leaves me with this final thought for you to mull over today as you go about your routine. If fundamental, seemingly mechanical habits like drinking a glass of water, metabolizing glycogen, or just getting 8 hours of sleep can so heavily dictate and control our supposedly deep emotional eating, what other major heavy emotional decisions in your daily life, like arguments with your partner, career doubts, existential dread, are actually just your body secretly asking for a glass of water or a quick nap?
It is a very revealing question to ask yourself the next time you feel completely overwhelmed by a situation.
Definitely something to think about the next time you are staring into the glow of the refrigerator at 9 o'clock at night. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.